In this video, we'll discuss the nuances of total ignore. I'll show you everything clearly with graphs. First, we need to understand, what is a breakup? In scientific works, I found the following definition, that parting isn't a momentary act, but a process unfolded in space and time in which there are its own stages and patterns. What does it mean? This means that the feeling of loss, sadness, longing, nostalgia, doubts don't arise immediately, but only after a while. It would seem that you've lived with a woman for several years, she should at least have a habit. How can she just put an end to it and just leave? Here I'll explain. The one who's abandoned, that's you, loses everything at once, and withdrawal begins. You begin to scroll through the pleasant episodes of your relationship in your head. Some endless associations with a woman begin to pop up. And for the one who leaves, there's no stress in this event. It turns out that when a woman breaks up with you, you're on the verge of divorce. The relationship's under threat. You can say hanging by a thread. You're sitting at home in horror with a pale face, trying to find wise advice on the internet. And the girl, meanwhile, as if nothing had happened, can have a nice conversation with her best friend, bragging, joking, having fun. She has more than a good mood, which only slightly deteriorates in your presence. Why? Because it's not customary to laugh at a funeral. That is, it's just a tribute to etiquette. I understand that it's very tempting to think that the girl is also going through a lot. She doesn't sleep at night. Well, she just hides it, doesn't show it much. No, it's not true. You feel the loss, but not her. She knows perfectly well that she just needs to write one text message and you leave as before, so she has no reason to dramatize what's happening. It's also very important to get rid of the illusion that a woman just doesn't understand what she's doing. That is, she goes straight into the ditch, to the certain death of your relationship, but doesn't realize this. A man wants to believe that a girl is just young or inexperienced, feisty, quick-tempered, principled, emotional, and that's why she creates a game. But deep down, she still loves me. This is complete nonsense. And a little later, it comes to the man, and he begins to panic. The man begins to look for tools that will allow him to cause the same feeling of loss. Some are trying to trigger a woman for jealousy. Others put ultimatums like, either come back right now and we'll leave as before, either go away forever. This, of course, won't work. That is, the girl must go through certain stages, and ignoring is simply able to speed up this process. I'd like to emphasize that the correct and timely entry into the ignore allows you to cause a feeling of loss almost instantly. That is, in practice, and even in my life, for a long time there were such cases, when a man was ahead of a woman with this separation by literally a few days and ended the relationship first, thanks to which a wave of intrusive pings from a woman was already a couple of weeks later. That is, this is a fundamentally important point. Who puts an end to it? The one who left is the one on the horse. The one who's been abandoned is suffering as if in a frying pan and doesn't know what to do. How to understand that in your situation you cannot do without ignoring? Option 1. The woman has become unable to negotiate. That is, any discussion of the relationship turns into a scandal, making claims, whipping up negative emotions. You see that she's stupidly trying to devalue you and make you look guilty. There's no constructive dialogue here and can't be. Option 2 is a murky uncertainty in the relationship. That is, the girl doesn't know what she wants, is confused in feelings, isn't sure if you need to be together, doesn't know if she needs a relationship now, wants to take a break, live separately, and so on. As I already told in one of the videos, all this drudgery serves as anesthesia for a woman. She knows for sure that she'll leave you, but she'll just do it a little later. Well, option 3 is a significant offense of a woman, after which it makes no sense to talk to her. That is, she swore, lied, talked to her ex, threatened to break up, and so on. If you've learned your script, then the most important thing is to make the right conclusion. All this means that your woman is dependent on acute feelings of love, which haven't been in a relationship for a long time. She just wants to get a horse dose of dopamine and oxytocin. After all, if it were, then believe me, she'd be happy, submissive, pliable, caring, homely right now. And she'd want intimacy with you to the point of trembling in her knees. I think you've noticed that the intimacy you've had lately hasn't been what it used to be. That is the first confirmation that the problem lies in the field of a woman's biochemistry. Confirmation number 2. Many of you had a so-called farewell meeting, a farewell intimacy, a farewell dialogue, when you break up and you, let her go. Well, you noticed that the girl got emotional at that moment, showed tenderness, was a little sad, hugged you. Well, that's it, it's worth you to increase the distance a little. Stop trying to maintain a relationship. Give her a reason to be sad. We're breaking up, yes, forever. Give her the opportunity to imagine that, yes, now he'll be there with another woman sometime. Immediately we get a small jump in hormones, which already changes her condition, her behavior. Yes, not for long, but nevertheless, you saw what I'm talking about now. So stop perceiving a woman as a relative or friend with whom you have a conceptual relationship. Agreed, done, promised, fulfilled. A relationship with such a woman is always about emotions, and emotions are hormones, and conditions and circumstances are needed for the release of the hormones. Here I'm often asked, does my wife still love me or not? Did she love me before? These are the wrong questions. The correct question is something like the following. Maksim, and what conditions do I need to create in a relationship so that this particular woman experiences vivid, intense feelings? Let me explain the principle itself, what I'm talking about now. 3 weeks ago, an old acquaintance texted me. He had something similar to a long-distance relationship. He's never ever seen a woman yet. She lives in another country, but at the same time, they constantly and for a long time communicate. He says, Maxim, I understand everything. It may not sound serious, but there is a reason why I'd like to be with her. But she isn't ready to move. Well, not in any way. What to do? Well, of course, I explained that the idea itself wasn't very good when I found out the details. But when I heard that he'd been trying to persuade her for several months, my hair stood on end. He gave her various arguments, reasons that she wouldn't need to work. I'll pick you up myself. She told her friends, parents, her psychoanalyst about this situation. But it never came to anything. She says that, yes, it's great, of course, but something inside me resists. I don't know, there are certain concerns. I say to this friend, listen, you're doing nonsense. All you had to do was arrange a week of very warm communication. Then carefully raise the issue of a personal meeting again. After refusing to take a little pause, and after a few hours record a voice message in which you say that she's a very valuable, important person for you, that you really wanted your story with her to be continued. But apparently, this isn't destined to happen. So you made a firm decision not to torment yourself, not her. That's it, period. And you don't read the subsequent message anymore, and of course, you don't open it. Couple of weeks later, this friend writes, how did you know? The woman asks to give her the opportunity to come and says that she's supposedly ready for a full-fledged move and only now realized that she needs this vital. Decided. That is, for naive men who don't understand the mechanics of relationships, this is probably perceived as a miracle. Well, for me, my friends, for people on the channel, subscribers who are practicing, this is the norm. You need to be an extremely naive person to believe that we are two conscious personalities who know what they want about this life, so you need to wait for some kind of readiness, her solutions, to help a woman sort out her emotions, dig into her childhood fears. Well, this is a bet for infantile romantics who don't want to come into contact with real life. Does this mean that I propose to build a family life in this way? No. I'm just showing that often only this approach is effective with most women. So you have only two options. Either you learn this and take all the risks, or you choose another woman who doesn't depend on emotions in any way. And if she didn't depend on them, she wouldn't have left you, by the way. We turn to ignore. There are 4 key stages. That is, the first is indifference and surprise. The pings at this stage look like this. What's going on? Why are you silent? Are you offended? The second stage is anger. A woman can write the following. What kind of kindergarten? Why don't you answer? Answer the question, I'm actually on business. Oh, well, if that's the case, well, okay, bye. That is, this is a certain kind of demonstrative attempt to show how she doesn't care, to express disdain. The woman seems to want to replay the situation, but she won't be able to do it if you don't answer it in any way. The third stage is bargaining. The woman can put a like there, congratulate on her birthday, write some neutral message as if nothing had happened, or find an excuse. Well, the fourth stage is already an apology. I'm sorry, I was a fool, we need to meet urgently, please answer. The dynamics of the development of the ignore may be different depending on the circumstances, but let's analyze the classic version. At the first stage, a woman may not yet understand that she's being ignored. Sometimes she perceives a man's reaction as an insult. No, she'll take offense a little, let go, and he himself will be the first to write. This has happened more than once. Well, as a rule, after 3-4 weeks, maximum of months and a half, such an illusion in a woman begins to disappear. That is, it becomes interesting what's happening to you. You're acting uncharacteristically. Maybe he made some kind of decision. No, it's not like him. Maybe he's got a woman. And if it's the same Dusia, and if it's the ex, and if it's a brunette from work, well, I guess you get it. She starts thinking, guessing, and of course, monitor you. This is already, by the way, a certain emotional investment. Then comes the stage of anger, at which a woman can already start provoking you, try to pick up her things, or give yours away. Be active on social networks, publish happy photos with quotes from the sages there, provoke you to jealousy and everything else. You know why she's doing this. It's important for a woman to simply get confirmation that you're experiencing more than she is. And this is enough not to worry. This is where her experiences will end immediately if her confirmation is received. That is, according to this logic, already at this stage, the beginning of ignoring made the woman doubt her chosen behavior strategy. That is, before distance, aggravation of the situation, resentment, or even ignoring worked perfectly for you when she answered you with a delay. She saw that you start to worry, and after that you shorten the distance yourself. Understand that I don't want to believe to it. Again, there is a temptation. A man is ready to write off the boorish behavior of a woman for anything, that she has a difficult stage in her life, her friends have set her up, the Earth's magnetic field has affected her so much, and she's so bold with everyone. She's born like this, and even from diapers. Childhood traumas have intensified. These are all excuses not to see the truth. You're just soft on yourself, and that's why she beat you and stopped respecting you. In this connection, it shouldn't be surprising that a woman ignores but can remain silent for a long time, counting on the fact that you yourself will come crawling. You gave reason to think so. Or she'll not be afraid to vulgarly provoke you to jealousy, because you'll forgive everything. She's just going to want to make you stressed out so that you snap, and then she's going to grab it. But, if all this doesn't happen, several months have passed, the woman sooner or later concludes, maybe you're not a rag at all, and you even have a backbone, and perhaps your good attitude was kindness, not weakness. Attention. It turns out only at this moment a woman begins to attach value to all the good things that you did for her. You understand, right, this principle? After all, kindness is the prerogative of the strong. If you suffered humiliation, put up with outright rudeness, didn't show rigidity to yourself and didn't raise a woman, then, of course, This is perceived by a woman as banal cowardice and slobbery. Admit it. It's true that you lied to yourself, found delusional explanations why this shit needs to be eaten. That's why she started treating you like that. So, okay, let's go further. Then the bargaining stage is already starting to turn on. That is, the woman realized that inaccessibility, impudent antics can't break through you. And she begins to bargain inside herself. Can I write? Yes, I won't be cheap. Or maybe it's worth it after all. Well, or at least I'll put a like. All of a sudden, I could have accidentally done something like that. In fact, pride prevents a woman from just apologizing to you. Well, sincerely, I mean. That is, even at this stage, a few months later, she isn't sure that you deserve such an attitude, such honor, such respect. She still has doubts. There may also be provocations here, but most often they're already positive and are still aimed at rapprochement, such signals. And only after some time it all comes to real sincere apologies. It's important to understand the difference between pause, ghosting and ignore. When a woman pauses, she doesn't receive negativity as such. There's a negative that has accumulated during your relationship with her, but it gradually goes down over time. A pause isn't capable of provoking a significant release of oxytocin and dopamine. That is the maximum possible result, that a woman can just start to get a little bored, can ping, can be ready to meet, but no more. If a man meets a woman after a pause, when you didn't write to her, she didn't too, just texted after a while, it will be temporary, she'll leave you again, make no mistake. That is, speaking of pause, the black arrow is a negative, which gradually just disappears. The red arrow is an interest that just as slowly goes up, but reaches a position when she's just curious, interested. Well, yes, it would be nice to talk, see each other, but nothing more. Therefore, this is enough for a day or a week. Well, yes, there are such stories when after a pause they converged for months, maybe two, but then there's a ghosting from a woman. Most often, it happens suddenly, the man doesn't even understand. It was good after all. Now it's like I didn't make any mistakes. The position on which you converged is suboptimal. Therefore, if it happened in your life that you converged after a pause, just know in advance that you need to wait for some event. Be ready for this, where a woman will start to ghost you, and at least here you can start ignoring in time, respectively. If we're talking about ignoring, the negative also gradually goes away. It's always a matter of time. But we have a stage of anger that men are very afraid of. It seems to them that a woman's capable of making a firm decision to put an end to this state of passion. In fact, everything's completely different. We must distinguish between the negativity associated with the fact that she simply doesn't want you, that you're not able to put her in her place, unable to give at least some feelings, and anger in ignoring the lack of control. These are completely different things. If a woman is angry in the ignore, it means that she's already been hooked, it's obvious. The phase of anger in ignoring is also always finite. It won't work to feed her anger constantly. And as soon as it ends, doubts and nostalgia will begin. And most importantly, it's at this stage that hormone traffic begins to go up. Only ignoring allows you to restart a woman's hormonal attachment and bring it to a qualitatively new level. Now, as for ignoring, that is, at the very beginning, the negative is on the decline. Then at the stage of anger, well, at least it looks like a woman starts to interact with you disdainfully, disrespectfully, or provoke you. Let's assume that the negative will increase. Although I've already explained that this is anger, not negativity, these are different things. But then it goes completely to zeros, completely. As for the interest, that is, there is no significant, serious rise before the stage of anger, during the stage of anger too, but then, starting from the third stage, there is a sharp increase. It's clear that this can take a variety of time periods, but the longest phases, in most situations, are the phase of indifference, the phase of disregard, and the phase of anger. If a woman's already started to bargain, then as a rule, it's a matter of several months. But if we're talking about ghosting, when, let's say, you manage to leave the woman who fell out of love with you, It causes the maximum concentration of anger. Well, yes, at the same time it's able to cling. This is all the negativity, it goes away again, but the unfinished gestalt, it remains. That is, we get a situation where a woman after a while can say, "What an asshole," but still I love him. She seems to be angry, but she can't refuse you. I've had this happen in my life too. And I myself then got in touch a few months later and said, "Let's go." And the girl is like, "Where? What? What for? You said it yourself there." I say, "No need to ask unnecessary questions." I say, "Let's go." She's like, "Okay." Do you understand how it works now? Now as for the ghosting. Of course, in the beginning, when you manage to get ahead of a woman and break up first, it causes such a wave of negativity. It hurts a person. A woman may even somehow say something in retaliation. An inexperienced person may have a feeling that now she'll hate me all her life. That's not so. There may even be the worst insults. It doesn't matter. Further, it's a matter of time. This negativity all goes away, and as soon as it decreases, interest immediately grows. I must say right away that everything works well if a woman is self-confident, selfish. You can do it with her. If we're talking about a woman who's at least a little moderate, frankly speaking, it's better to use the classic ignore. But if the ignore is universal and works for all women, then there are many details with the ghosting. And a lot depends on the psychotype of a woman. But if a woman rigidly ghosted you, blocked you, said, "Don't text me, get out," well, yes, most likely it's for a long time. That is, only after 6-8 months or even longer, she has a desire to get in touch and start monitoring. And only then you can start ignoring. And there are no other options here. That is, one of the most important functions of the task of ignoring is the elimination of already formed negative neural paths. How does it work in practice? That is, at the very beginning of the relationship, there is no negativity on the part of the woman as such, although you could afford the most different things. You couldn't flush in the toilet, you could regurgitate after dinner, you could throw socks around the house, you could create tension in something in a relationship, but nevertheless, there's hormone traffic. And therefore, this whole negative, it actually didn't accumulate. Yes, let's say a woman didn't even notice in any way. But as soon as feelings go down, as soon as the hormonal level goes down and the man doesn't know how to maintain it, accordingly, the accumulation of negativity continues. And these are physiological changes. What I want to pay attention to. Men are sometimes surprised. It feels like she hates me. She can't hear me. It's not weird. That is, she doesn't remember all this good now, in principle. There are only negative scenarios, negative memories, accumulated negative experience. And then, when it comes to the limit, when it comes to the possibility of parting, there are like a lot of options in front of you, these red arrows. That is, go to a psychologist, have a sincere conversation with a woman, understand what the problem is, become the best version of yourself, become perfect, stop throwing socks around the house, start using a brush. Well, of course, I'm joking, but you know what I'm talking about. Accordingly, this won't help anything. It won't change anything. Physiological changes have already occurred. Accordingly, you have changed. I don't care. To have a sincere conversation, a woman will just essentially broadcast what I don't want, period. Go to a psychologist. There will be exactly the same story. That is, a woman in this state, she isn't fighting for a relationship. There won't be a situation when she wakes up and is like, "No, I still have to be with him." That's not going to happen. By the way, if we were drawing a graph of your emotional state, then you have exactly the opposite. So your interest is at its peak right now, by the way. So, what ignoring allows you to do? Ignoring allows you to disappear from all radars when you leave at all, when you have no communication. And this happens mainly in the ignore, in the pause too, when you don't communicate too. But in the ignore, it's most evident. All these negative tracks, they begin to collapse. And some pleasant moments begin to pop up in her memories again. As you understand, one of the most important functions of ignoring is the destruction of negatively anchored neural connections, which after parting are in excess. That is, in order to get out of a relationship, a woman pumps herself up with negativity, and this even has physiological changes. That is, you don't have to wonder why she hates you. All that's needed to eliminate this is ignoring time and lack of information. I immediately give a hint. In the first 2 or 3 months of ignoring, you need to disappear from all radars. If the separation was accompanied by obvious anger, hatred towards you, and you managed to chase the woman, then the first provocation can be used at least in 6-8 months. If a woman just fell out of love and the feelings disappeared, then after 3-5 months. In general, there are a great many provocations. I divide them into such subgroups. There are positive provocations, there are negative ones. For example, removal from friends, if a woman's listed as a friend on social networks. There are provocations aimed at intrigue. For example, to remove a photo in WhatsApp and the time of entry. It will look as if you added her to the blacklist. A good reason for her to write and check. There are provocations for jealousy. You just post an innocent photo from a romantic place, but you're alone in the photo, or you're not in the frame at all. She starts thinking, where are you? Who are you with? Provocations can have different intensity, starting with semi-noticeable hints, ending with something large-scale. Quite often, by the way, there were such cases when the ex leaves the ignore after she already sees everything. The man has a new full-fledged relationship, and the ignore there lasted at least a year. It seems like time has passed, right? And she immediately leaves the ignore. I'm not suggesting that you do it, bluff like that. In general, I treat provocations carefully like this. When a person with shaking limbs tells me we need to provoke her urgently, I say don't do anything. Put things in order inside your head first. A photo can be considered a universal provocation, just from some new place that she doesn't know. This will already make a woman guess, think, fantasize. The contrast scheme works very cool. That is, when you can close your profile for a month, then reopen it. It receives traffic of information, but dose this information. If you're not in social networks, you can do the same in WhatsApp. As for ignoring mistakes, mistake number 1, that is, ignoring is a struggle, not the ability to need a woman more effectively. Point number 2, if there are doubts about the expediency of using ignore, then don't use it. You'll make it even worse. Point number 3, thoughtless use of provocations won't help, but will harm. If you doubt something, it's better to give up this idea. Point number 4, don't start a new relationship as long as there is withdrawal and you want her back. Otherwise, you'll complicate your life specifically. Point number 5. You'll definitely be tempted to break down. There'll be fears that the ex absolutely doesn't care. There'll be an illusion that you need to text her, and it will probably become easier. Don't know why, but I feel that this is the right decision. It won't get any easier. Point number 6. You don't need to scan the girl's life for does the ignore work or not. Otherwise, you'll bring down all the power of the ignore against yourself. Point number 7. Don't communicate with your mutual friends on the topic of your relationship. It will come out sideways. Now let's answer the frequent questions that come to me, right? That is it worth reading messages in ignore? It's better not to read. It raises more questions and provokes more writing. A woman thinks, what if you just didn't see the SMS? How to get into ignore correctly? Of course, such things should be discussed at the consultation, but I'll say generically. That is, option 1 is a sudden entry into the ignore without prior swearing, spats, final farewell conversations. On a day when nothing portends trouble. That's how cool it works. Option 2, on the wave of positivity. That is, you make a call, perhaps even such a romantic evening, or even make it fabulous for a whole week. After which you inform the woman in the evening that you've made a difficult decision. And it will be better for everyone that everything was going to this. Therefore, it's necessary to embed her words in this message, which devalued your relationship with her, but without negativity and tin. Option number 3 that might work is to make her guilty. That is, we're making up a message that will highlight all her shoals and unfair attitude towards you, the tolerance with which you treated it. But you're already tired of doing it. It's best to say this over the phone, or at least in a voice message. But if you feel that you won't be convincing, then voice message is better. And in general, speak calmly and firmly. Option 4 is to enter the ignore after the next mistake. That is, it may be easier for you mentally, and it will also work well. You just wait, she messes up, start ignoring. When do pings start most often? The most popular scenario is a ping for some holiday, provided that the ignore has already lasted for 5 months. Often men have a question. Why can't you talk to a woman like adults? Why ignore? To discuss everything, to decide and to put all the dots. Well, I explained. Parting is always a situation when one person messes up. It almost never happens that two people agree to part. This can happen if people get carried away with each other for one evening and then get disappointed. And then it doesn't sound very realistic. It's hard to imagine a relationship format in which people just said, let's break up. Well, okay. People have certain mutual obligations, promises, vows, plans, perhaps claims. And here there is a parting that becomes like a life and death battle. And surely someone alone will remain out of work, guilty. And it absolutely doesn't matter what it's framed by. Some kind of conversation, controversy, spat, a trip to a psychologist. Ultimately, parting is an attempt to identify the culprit. Parting is always an attempt to protect yourself. It's very rare when one of the partners says, you know, I thought for a long time and realized that we need to separate, and this is my fault. This rarely happens. And then, let's say a person says it. Let's assume that a man. He goes to his mistress and says to his wife, yes, I'm to blame. But he's not doing it all sincerely. He says so that he can run and get high faster. He says that for an excuse, so that his wife will already get away from him. Well, I'll apologize to her because she's good. Good, but a log. Well, boring. Well, she's already freaked me out. Anyway, inside his head, if we dig there, he considers her a schmuck and therefore leaves. Well, there's no sincerity here. People aren't capable of deep sincerity when parting, and if they're capable, they wouldn't have parted at all. Well, let's fantasize. Imagine, a woman fell out of love, but turned her soul inside out, yes, in front of you, and said as it is. So what? She still doesn't understand what the extinction of feelings and emotions is connected with, because she can't do anything about it. Only you can do it. And she's sitting and racking her head about what kind of claim to make to you, or she can't even come up with it at all, and says that something inside, the feelings have disappeared, that's all. And now, I'll answer the questions that people have sent about ignoring the videos. The first question I saw was how to get out of the ignore. Well, if we're talking about universal rules, a woman shouldn't smear guilt. Sometimes such a message comes that, listen, well, in general, we'd better talk to you. We're both wrong in many ways, so, well, we understand. She doesn't feel guilty. She's still trying to bargain. The same goes for SMS, where she just reports about some feelings. Often the girl texts, and I missed you. Well, that's great. Well, I wouldn't even ask you about it. Thank you for reporting back. How does that concern you? There are, of course, people who, like the torpedo flies out, immediately begins to respond to her, but it ends up being sad. This isn't the way of the ignore. You have to see that she feels guilty about herself. That's first. Second is that there is an understandable initiative. We need to see each other. Listen to me, please. And now, when this happens for the first time, it's not worth answering. We don't know what's going on in her life. That is, we understand and the ignore works. But these words, these reactions can actually be connected simply by events in her life. She may have had a drink that evening. Maybe she felt sad. Maybe she just wanted to dramatize. There's no guarantee that this is it. Therefore, it's better when it happens for the first time not to let it out of the ignore on this day. But when a few days later, maybe a few weeks, and there was several months. Imagine how deceptive everything can be, how subtle the moment is. That is, there's such a thing, for example, that the ignore goes for 2.5 or 3 months. And now it seems that she's matured so quickly, she's already texting, that she's worrying, but the man doesn't answer. And then it took another 3 months. Then it's already a real way out. What would have happened if we had released earlier? Everything would be bad. So be safe, don't let it out right away. What mistakes do men most often make? Yes, they start calling, texting. This, of course, shouldn't be done. That is, all you say is that I'm ready to listen to you. There should be no virtual forgiveness, only a meeting where you need to fix the fact of who is apologizing, to whom is apologizing, and who needs it more. But at the same time, you don't need to blame a woman. You don't need to remember anything. You don't need to treat her hardly. She already apologizes. But it's still necessary to fix the fact. It's important. Therefore, there's no need for any calls, no need to stir up, dig into your past relationships and discuss it again, who was right there. Get rid of it. What other mistakes do men make? Well, in principle, these are probably the key mistakes. If you're from different cities, well, then you have to wait from the moment when she can come to you herself, respectively. And, well, the stupidest mistakes, perhaps, is when a man says that, in fact, I did it on purpose, so I ignored you. Well, don't do anything like that. The next question is, what if a woman finds another man during the ignore? Well, this is possible, of course. She can find him now. Maybe she's already found him. We clearly need to understand what the probability of another man in her life depends on. From her desire, period. From the fact that you'll be guarding her. From the fact that you'll try to catch some kind of friendly wave with her. The probability doesn't decrease in any way. But if she falls for ignoring, then there will be much less reasons to look for someone. That is, you ignore this probability, but it's still, of course, possible. Next. The man writes, it's better not to ignore. It's better to apologize 100 times, crawl to her feet 100 times, but you'll understand that she doesn't love you and put an end to it. Well, there is a certain logic in these words, but this isn't a universal recommendation. Look, yes, there are people who, due to their emotional state, cannot properly ignore. That is, they ignore themselves. That is, they begin to monitor the woman. They begin to constantly scroll thoughts in their head. They begin to focus attention on this. They can't switch. They can't tune in correctly. Accordingly, there are a lot of doubts. Accordingly, for such a person, a strategy can really be more effective if you put a point exactly. That is, if the ignore torments you, it's better to put an end to it. How? Well, what works is when you write a big message and send it to her. Without a second thought, what conclusions she'll draw, what she'll think, you say goodbye forever, everything. You block everywhere, you delete everything, and send a message after which you already understand that it's unlikely that she'll make her way back, just because you think that everything lies on your soul, and you close the story for yourself. There's such an option. Next. Sergey asks how to act and ignore if, in general, a call comes from a woman. Well, just don't pick up the phone, that's first. If it's a call from an unknown number, you calmly say, yes, hello? And she's like, hi. First, you listen to what she has to say. Then you immediately say that it's just not very convenient to talk now, maybe later. You don't pick up the phone anymore. You mark this number, no information. Next. Are there any interesting questions here? Is it possible in the process of ignoring to respond to congratulations on the holiday, such as thank you too? Of course not. Of course you'll reset everything, although someone has already answered the person here that no, of course. These are obvious things. How can I ignore my wife if there are children? No way, this is distancing. There's a separate playlist on the channel, open it. The next question is, the woman removed from the blacklist, is it ping? Well, there are already many such anecdotes on this topic. If a woman took shit in front of your door, is it ping or not ping? And what stage is it? Listen, of course, in the course of ignoring, sometimes there are a lot of such oddities. That is, unfamiliar numbers can call you and keep silent. Some fakes begin to be added to you. Some dubious women begin to get acquainted with you. That is, it's all as suspicious as possible. But if you try to count female pings everywhere, it will just break you. I'll explain why. If she doesn't ping, the alarm level increases. If she pings, and as often happens later, there's a lull, it starts to eat you up. What if she snapped? And so on indefinitely. That is, instead of letting go of the situation, you begin to get involved in it more and more. Therefore, it's unacceptable to do this. It's not necessary to scan a woman for pings. Does the ignore work or does it not? Cut off all this information completely from yourself. The next question, Nick RB. Maksim, good day, that's the question. Some kind of mysticism, maybe a coincidence, although for many it happens that as soon as a man forgets about his ex, she starts pinging or completely leaves the ignore. Yes, sure. Well, it was discussed 10, 15 years ago, when there's a very small number of people who generally knew what ignore was and how to apply it correctly. These were, as a rule, such small forums on which how many dozens of people were there. And each story was carefully studied for certain patterns. It's clear that during the activity, how many people have already gone through consultations there, and on streams, how many questions were asked? Quite a lot. But this is a version. It has always found its confirmation back in those days. Have I ever had this in my life? It was. I've had this happen twice. That is, as soon as I caught myself. It even happened that day after day. It must have been about 3.5 months, maybe 4. I wake up and let go, and I'm like, whew, how I don't care. And on this day, there's a wave of pings. I don't know how to explain it, some kind of metaphysics, I don't know, but it should motivate, definitely. What would I like to say in conclusion? Despite the fact that I have a separate course on ignoring, which I filmed a couple of years ago, I'd recommend not taking it, but taking the course What Women Are Like 2022. Or the course The Master of Online Dating, because practice, of course, is necessary. That is, if you understand that you aren't ready yet, start with the course What Women Are Like. If you're ready, then immediately from the course The Master of Online Dating. And it's better to combine both the first and the second. Thank you all so much for watching.